Hey everyone, this is Sebastian. Today we're going to be looking at how you can configure roles and permissions for your developers so they have limited data access or maybe feature access when working within the console. So here I am in the 8-base console, and the first thing I think is really important to mention is just a architectural feature of 8-base, which is that the entire 8-base console experience is just a front end to your workspace API. What that really means is anything that you can do or that you do in the console can be programmatically performed via the GraphQL API, right? So really an 8-base workspace is just one big workspace API, and this is our front end to that. Now that means that the same type of roles and permissions that we would create or use for users of the applications we build to interface with the GraphQL API is the same type of authorization system that the 8-base console uses when communicating with that API. So we end up defining roles and permissions for our developers the same way currently that we define roles and permissions for our end users. Now, let's create a developer role to demonstrate this. So let's go into our app services. And here in roles, let's create a role, and we're just going to call it developer level 1 role. And this description, which is obviously just a description, will be a developer role with limited data privileges. I can't spell. There we go. Cool. We're going to add this role. So essentially what we're trying to accomplish here is we want to be able to invite developers to collaborate with us within the workspace, but we don't want them seeing all our data, right? So we're going to create a developer role and now permission what data that user can or can't see, whether it's via the API when they're working or logged in, or more specifically here in the console. So once I open up this developer level 1 role, we have a few different tables in our workspace here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, we don't want them to be able to delete any of these records, but we want them to be able to see them all. And then when it comes to the invoices, let's say that we actually don't want them to know how much each invoice is worth. That's private, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say the order value is none from an access standpoint. So even though they can see the records and potentially update the records, they can't interact with that field, which is the order value. And we're also going to allow them to see every user in the database. They need to be able to see the user records. However, they cannot update any user records. And then what we want to make sure is that they actually can't snag all our users' email addresses. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say that, hey, they can't view or update, obviously, the email field. And we're also going to make it so that they can't interact with the last name field. So all they can get is the first name, and the other information, those ones aren't available to them. And save that. Now, this was configuring some of the data permissions, right? So what operations can they perform on the records, such as we don't want them deleting records, as well as what data fields we want to hide. So like, for example, if we were storing a social security number, let's say, on the users table, we would potentially want to mask that so they can't see it. And then if we jump over here to the apps tab, we can now also say, hey, here are some of the different system areas in the console that we do or don't want them to have access to. So for example, we don't want them to be able to change our schema, right? But we do want them to be able to access the data viewer. So we're going to turn that one on. And for now, let's just leave it here. So now that that role is configured, I'm going to go over to the settings, team area, and I'm going to invite my first team member. And I'm not going to give them a name, but I am going to give them an email address, which is sebschult@gmail.com. And I'm going to assign them this developer level 1 role and send off the invite. So me as the admin working in this workspace, I can do everything, right? However, once this sends off, cool, invitation pending, I'm actually going to switch tabs here to where I'm logged in another Chrome window to my SebSchult account. I'm going to reload it. And here I can see that I have a new inbox notification in my developer home. So I'm going to open that, and I can see that Sebastian Schultz has invited me to join their workspace, Sandbox Workspace 0001. I'm going to accept that invitation. So that's accepting the invitation with the associated role. And now when I go back into my developer home, I can see that I have access to this workspace. Cool, so let me open it up. Now it's open, and the first thing I'm going to do is jump right into the data tab. Now, when I go into the data tab here, I can see that it's not giving me any option to add new fields because the schema wasn't enabled, or schema management wasn't enabled. But what's cool is that if I go to my invoices table here, I can see that 8base has hid the order value. So that's not being returned because I don't have permission to view that field. Same with if I open up the users table, I can see that, hey, I have access to all the different fields except for the, the email and the last name. So those fields are hidden to me too as the developer. Now, if I were to try to delete a record, let me try to do that really quickly. So it loads. Cool. If I were to go in there and click delete, it's not giving me that option. I could edit it if I wanted to, because I left that available. So as you can see, it's kind of customized the console experience to allow me or not allow me to do the things that I am or am not supposed to do. And once again, even if I were to try to say, hey, give me a query back from the invoices list where I want for every item in there, the order value, I run it. I think I'm having a little slow Wi-Fi at this point. Cool. We can see that it's just saying there's no order values, which is not true. Every invoice has an order value, but it's masking that field for us. Still returning the record because we have access to those records, but hiding the field. So I hope that this gave you a good understanding of how you can create roles and permissions for your developers, and by doing so, how that will impact the developer's experience when developing or working within the console or interacting with the API. Now, one other cool feature about developer roles is that they can be permissioned on a per environment level. So if you are using CI/CD and you have different environments such as production, development, staging, QA, feature branches, all that type of stuff. The roles that you create in those environments can be unique to those environments, and then when you invite developers to work in those environments, those will be working as you'd expect there. So that gives you a lot of flexibility then in saying, hey, in the development environment, the developer can see all the data because they're developing new features. However, the developer in the production environment where the data is sensitive can only see certain things. So a lot of different levels of customability or customization that you can do to make sure that you are securely giving access to your project to the developers as it's needed. Now, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel. Hope to see you in future videos, and happy developing.